This is my basement, and this is generally where I put chicks every year when we raise them in a brooder. The brooder I'm using right now is a simple 4x8 metal raised bed. The reason why I'm using this as my brooder is because it's what I have. I recently ordered a couple of these that will eventually go outside into my garden, but for now, it's going to be the perfect brooder. You're going to find that you don't need anything fancy for a brooder. Last year I used a fire ring. I've used chicken tractors. You can use a wooden box. You can use pretty much anything, but for the first 3 weeks, this is a great setup for the chicks at that time of their life. I'm going to share with you what you need as far as the supplies when it comes to setting up your brooder for the first time. The time of year and your climate really is going to affect where you put your brooder. I would rather put this in the garage or a shed. However, right now in Wisconsin, we're getting down into the 20s at night. It's just too cold, even with heat lamps. So I have to have this in my unfinished basement, works out pretty well. If you are planning on putting your brooder, especially in your basement, I would recommend putting a tarp down first. It's just gonna make things easier when you get rid of the bedding later on. I do this in the garage too. It just keeps everything a lot easier. Later on, once you move the chicks outside, they no longer need a brooder. There are 5 things you need with your brooder. You need a border, which in this case, it's my raised bed. You need bedding, which will be pine shavings, I'll show you in a little bit. You need a feeder, you need a waterer, and you need some type of heat source, like a heat lamp, a heat dome, or even a heating pad. I like to use pine shavings instead of cedar. Cedar's got this more toxic aroma that's not good for chickens necessarily. I use shavings instead of like sawdust because sometimes the chickens will peck at it and they're less likely to consume shavings. They especially want to do that in the first week or so. Anyways, a little pro tip is when you open this compressed bag of shavings is to do it inside the brooder so you don't make a mess elsewhere. So I just take off the top like this, shake it out, set it aside, and then just set this down and start spreading it out. The idea here is not to use the whole bag because you're going to want to use that later on. It's compressed, so it's going to open up quite a bit. I'm probably only going to use maybe 2 inches right now. This is only for the first 3 weeks, then I'm going to move them so I don't find myself needing the entire bag at all. Maybe like that. I tend to do a little less because you can add more later on. You just kind of want to cover everything. They don't eat much during the first week or so. And you have to keep that in mind because people often have these big feeders, and that's okay, even for a large amount of chicks like I'm getting, but you really don't need as much as you think. What I like to do is put the feed off to the side over here, the food and water. For the feeder, I have this 2x8 right there. I have this feeder right here. It's very small. You're thinking for 55 chicks, this is nothing. I'm going to use this for as long as I can. If I have to fill this up twice a day, that's fine. I do have a much larger feeder. I'm not worried about feed at the beginning. I'm worried about keeping them warm enough and them having access to water. That's the key, especially for the first week. They're going to find feed and they'll be just fine. If they just peck at this a little bit, they're going to be fine. That's not even going to get that empty. I mean, I might have to fill that up once a day for the first 3-4 days. Now, when it comes to the water, I'm going to have more water because you always want to give them access to water. If the food runs out for 4 or 5 hours, who cares? If the water does, that's a problem. They're like humans. They need water a lot more than they need food. So I'm going to put this here, the water here on this piece of wood. And the reason why I put it on the piece of wood is because you're less likely to get shavings. This gives the chicks an opportunity to jump up on the corner, or once they're taller, they can reach in and drink right there. That's important in my opinion because if you put this directly on the shavings, chicks are messy. When they jump around and they're going to jump into the water because they're curious and just silly, they're like little kids, they're going to bring a lot of this stuff with them, these shavings, and you want to keep that separate. So setting that up like that is ideal in my opinion. To be honest with you, if I was doing a small flock of like 10, this would be the best brooder. These Rubbermaid containers are amazing for the first week or two because you can clamp a heat lamp on here, put a board across, or take a really small one. I'd probably use a bigger Rubbermaid container, maybe a little bit wider, a little bit longer, but I think you get the idea. All your mess stays in there. They do not need a lot of space the first couple of weeks. They need to stay warm, they need to stay dry, fed, and watered. So these are actually really, really nice. And it's not something I would overlook because when you're done with the chickens, you can obviously use this for something else All right, so now these heated lamps. These can be an issue because some people don't like the safety aspect, but I'm going to show you a little tip how to avoid, for the most part, ever having an issue with safety with these heat lamps. This is the first heat lamp I have installed, and you can see it's clamped on to this rope. The rope is also attached to this little wire here that attaches to the heat lamp. Now there's no pressure here. All the pressure is where the clamp is. Now if this clamp were to break, you would still have connection here. So it's basically double connected. And it's paracord, it's 550 paracord. It's very strong, especially for a 2-pound lamp. It's not even 2 pounds. Then I just secure it up there to a nail in the ceiling. This is very, very simple. And it is all the way down to the ground like this. That way I'm not clamping it onto anything. I don't have to run boards across, which you can do. I've done that in the past. You really need the first week, especially, actually up to the first 3 weeks, 1 square foot for 3 chicks. That's not a lot of space. We've got 55 chicks coming in here and 32 square feet about. So we've got plenty of space to meet that standard. A healthy brooder is going to have chicks sleeping and going by the heating lamp, drinking water, feeding, moseying around, walking around and exploring, sleeping, drinking, feeding, wash, rinse, repeat. When you get feed for chicks, you want to get what's called chick starter. It's got a higher protein, which is what chicks need at a younger age. When they're older, they're going to be a little less dependent on protein, and they're going to actually use starch instead. So I keep the feed right next to the brooder at all times. Cut as close to the top as I can. I don't have a container for this. Not when they're in the brooder stage. And with this little feeder, all I do is dip this down into the feed. So they're going to be able to feed equally around there. And there's only going to be a few feeding at one time. They don't all feed at the same time. It's not like regular chickens where you throw something in their feeder, then they all run in at one time. These little chicks are going to explore and mosey around and just kind of do what little chicks do. Here you have it. We're all set up. We've got the chick starter. Feed is all set. The water in here. Both lamps are installed. This is using 550 paracord, which is very strong. This is using some metal wire. I've got it attached at 2 different points like we talked about for safety. Plenty of space. 2, maybe 3 inches of pine shavings. Extra pine shavings when you layer on later. We are absolutely ready to go for the 55 production chicks, which I'll be picking up shortly. And I will show you exactly how I introduce those 55 chicks properly to the brooder to ensure a healthy and good start to their life as chickens, as our production chickens for us here on our homestead. Thanks for watching. Please let me know if you have any questions down in the comments below. I hope to see you on the next one when we have 55 chicks in this brooder.